All right, let's get this forecast started. So, I am actually personally extremely excited for this week forecast because I actually finally have some good news for you. I don't control the weather. Sometimes I don't have anything good to report, but this week is not one of those weeks. So, before we actually talk about this week, let's talk about what we've been experiencing in the few weeks leading up to this because the context is absolutely necessary to understand what's going on right now. So, let's just say, like, roughly the last 3 weeks or so before this week. The last 3 weeks or so were generally very dark because they were mostly centered around a new moon, and then plus we had Mercury retrograde for that whole time. So combining three things really, combining Mercury retrograde with being so close to the winter solstice, and then also having that new moon, it created a very dark and kind of slow environment astrologically, if that makes sense. And so it was kind of this, not just a dark vibe, but very kind of grungy. We may have been very skeptical. It almost reminds me of Scorpio in a way, even though technically this has nothing to do with Scorpio. Really that whole process of going within, going backward, all those things that we're familiar with Mercury retrograde, combining that with the moon having little to no light. The plus side is that it was the perfect environment for looking inward on ourselves. The negative side is that we don't always want to do that. Sometimes we might not like what we see. I think we were all of us in our own way were dealing with some very harsh aspects of our own personal realities. So in a way, depending on how you look at it, we all just went through the same process the last few weeks of looking inward and gaining that self-awareness. But what that looks like for each one of us would be dramatically different because, we're all dealing with kind of different demons, different, situations. It's very personal. That's kind of the whole point of it. So it was very pressurized, very difficult. There may have not been as much activity in a clear kind of literal way, but there was a lot of activity going on behind the scenes in our subconscious, in our dreams, in our minds, etc. A lot of deep, heavy thoughts and feelings beneath the surface. Okay. So that was the last 3 weeks. That is completely changing now, and that's what I'm excited about. And don't get me wrong, there's a purpose for everything. Okay. You have to go through those more difficult periods astrologically to get to the sweet stuff, right? That's just how it works. It's like they say, it's always darkest before the dawn. That's very true astrologically. Anytime you show me some good, easy transits, there were some hard transits before that. That's just how it works, okay? But yeah, my point is we are getting to some very juicy stuff. This week's forecast will actually cover Monday, December 16th through Sunday, December 22nd. However, I did want to show you the chart for Sunday, December 15th, because on this day, Sunday, one day before the week forecast, this is where two developments happen that really shape this whole week. And that would be the full moon in Gemini happening at 23 degrees, very early in the day, Eastern Standard Time. And then also on Sunday, Mercury stationing direct, okay? So really for the entire last week, Mercury was basically stationary, although it was technically still retrograde. And then for this coming week now, Mercury, for the entire week that we're talking about for this forecast, Mercury is technically direct. But keep in mind, it's a slow process. Mercury has to gradually gain its momentum again. And even then, Mercury still has to traverse the post shadow. So in other words, Mercury retrograded the last few weeks. Now it's direct, but it still has to backtrack over the area that it just went retrograde over. So basically what that means is we're still dealing with many of the same themes that we have been for the last few weeks. But the experience is going to be completely different because we're going in the opposite direction, right? So rather than looking within and going backward and, digging stuff up, we're not digging stuff up anymore. We've already done that. We've already, ideally, we've already processed a lot of that. And so now we are dealing with many of the same themes, but we're moving forward, okay? We're solving things, we're putting things away rather than digging them up. And so that's why, I think there's a lot of confusion about the post shadow. It technically is still dealing with many of the same issues of the Mercury retrograde, but the experience is completely different. It's much easier for the 87% of us that were born with Mercury direct, okay? And so those are the two things. We're coming off of that full moon, and then we're coming off Mercury direct. So both of those indicate the energy is back. I do understand that Mars just recently retrograded, I believe on Friday. So that is, that is heavy, that ambition of that, very personal planet, inner planet. Having that retrograde, that does, I'll grant you that does take away a certain amount of ambition. We might be more reserved with our ambitions and more selective about how we assert those energies, and we're kind of going backward on that level. But still, I do think, as most people know, Mercury retrograde is such a dramatic, it's very tangible. So I still think, even with Mars retrograde, combining Mercury direct with, coming off of that full moon, the moon still has lots of light as we are getting into this week. Both of those to me suggest really turning a new leaf, going into a new chapter. There's just so much activity, so much energy right now that, I really haven't seen a chart this energetic for at least 3 or 4 weeks for sure. Okay, so that's what I'm so excited about. Other than that, the moon will be transiting from Cancer through Libra this week, and that's another thing that I think is pretty nice. If you look at the signs, honestly, pretty much all the signs between Taurus and Libra, the moon does at least fairly well in. So again, this week, moon cruising from Cancer through Libra, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. Moon does pretty well in all of these signs. That's another, I would say, positive thing. I would say those are universally easy transits for us. Obviously, each person has their own experience, just like with anything I say in these forecasts. But universally, this is a collectively kind of easy region for the moon to be in. And other than that, the main pattern that I noticed, because in general, the planets are pretty scattered right now, but the one pattern that I did notice is that for the first, let's say, 2/3 of the week, there is really a lack of Earth. Uranus is the only planet in an Earth sign, and of course, Uranus is kind of an outer planet. It's not as directly involved with our day-to-day experience. So having that lack of Earth, on the one hand, I can give you the pros and the cons. On the one hand, yeah, we might feel ungrounded, maybe unstable. But on the other hand, even, I am an Earth sign. I have my sun in the Earth sign. But I'm actually excited for this as well, because again, we've had such heavy energies over the last few weeks. So I think this lack of Earth is actually great for propelling us forward. We do have, I would say, a decent amount of air. Well, especially air and fire, but to a lesser extent, water as well. So all that air and fire it's propelling us forward. It's it's much lighter. These are the lighter elements. Sun, Mercury, Mars, all in fire signs. Venus, Pluto, Moon, Jupiter in air signs. At least this is for Sunday again, but but you get what I'm saying. There's a lot of, even water is lighter than Earth. Okay, so yeah, it's light. That's what everything is pointing to as we start out the week. Everything's light. Everything's moving forward. We're finally getting some more of that like physical activity. Some more of that action-oriented type of energy, and really we're coming back to what Sagittarius should be, or usually is, which is usually it's a happy time where, it's a relatively carefree time. I talked about that in a recent video where, the sign leading up to the winter solstice, you would think that it's such a dark time that it would be really negative, right, or pessimistic, but actually it's the opposite. It's kind of like, I've been thinking about this. It's almost like Scorpio is the apocalypse, and then Sagittarius is after the apocalypse, which realistically, I guess that would be depressing, but it's almost kind of like, shit already hit the fan, everything already went chaotic the month prior. So typically Sagittarius is a time where there's no inhibitions. Let's just party, nothing matters. We're not thinking about tomorrow or next week. We're just living in the moment, like party like it's 1999. That's usually the energy of Sagittarius. So again, we haven't really been experiencing that, because of Mercury retrograde. It's just been unusually heavy for this time of year, I think. But with Mercury direct, it's more like, quote unquote normal Sagittarius. It's more fun, lively, outgoing, etc. Okay, yeah, and I do have some developments to talk about for this week, so let's get into it. Before we actually talk about the week forecast, I do want to let you know I am still doing personal readings, so be sure to check out manic.mercurian.net for more information on those. They really are priced very competitively. You're not going to find a more in-depth reading for a lower price anywhere else. And I really do appreciate all of you who have gotten readings. They're a lot of fun, and they help support the channel. They allow me to post content like this, so thank you. Okay, but anyway, so for Monday, December 16th, Um, there's not a whole lot going on, at least in terms of aspects. There may be a lot going on for you, though, because, again, we're still just coming off of that full moon. Again, the full moon was only one day before in Gemini. So at this point, moon is in Cancer, which is, it is a different sign, obviously, and it is a little bit heavier. So I do think the energy has kind of taken like a slight nosedive from the weekend. But the moon, if you can see the moon at this point, it's going to be very full still. It's not going to be completely full, but it's still very well lit. And so there's still so much energy there. Plus the moon is in domicile in Cancer as well. Again, it's just a totally fresh outlook. And I think having moon in domicile is actually really great as well, because it means that we know how we feel, which is such a blessing. We may still be dealing with different challenges in this area or that area, but at least we know how we feel. At least we know what our stance is, on a collective level. So even that's very exciting. This is one of those days where there is a lack of earth. Moon, and I think I already interpreted that lack of earth could be ungrounded, but it's also really great for mobility. Let's be spontaneous, let's change things up, let's get a little weird, let's try something new. That's kind of what the energy, I think, even with moon in Cancer, which is a pretty conservative energy, a pretty cautious energy, I still think everything is, I don't know. I mean, we have to keep in mind moon in Cancer, sun in Sagittarius, these are very different signs. They're both very passionate and very, soulful. They both are thinkers as well. They think a lot. But the huge difference, though, is that sun is in a very adventurous sign, moon is in a very cautious sign. I think these are very complementary. We can be cautious, and at the very least, we can be grounded in our emotion. Emotion can be grounding. There can be clarity and intelligence in emotion, coming from the moon in Cancer. And I think that's really excellent for using that to propel us forward, because we're all doing something new this week. What that looks like is different for everyone, but we're all doing something new. Moon does trine Saturn today, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Moon and Saturn both in water signs. Just afternoon Eastern Standard Time, moon reaches 13 degrees Cancer, where it trines Saturn. And basically that just means that I think having that emotional awareness is going to help us spiritually, with spiritual boundaries and maybe planning or goals that have to do with our own kind of emotional and spiritual well-being. Those might be really great to look at with this kind of aspect, because this is about as friendly as Saturn gets. Okay. Saturn is in Pisces, so it's a little bit more laid back than usual. And with moon trining, a trine to Saturn, this is about as easy. So in other words, it's almost like we've made peace with any kinds of boundaries or restrictions that we have spiritually. We're at peace with those. We can work with it. We've accepted it, or we have a greater chance of accepting our spiritual condition with that aspect. Going to Tuesday, December 17th, moon continues through Cancer, and technically very late in the day, Eastern Standard Time, moon will enter Leo. But most of the day, for most of us, moon is in Cancer still. And moon makes another aspect here. So, and again, it's just afternoon, if that matters to you, Eastern Standard Time. But moon reaches 27 Cancer, where it trines Neptune at 27 Pisces. This is really interesting. Both Monday and Tuesday, moon trining these outer planets in Pisces. Whenever we have those trines to those outer planets, we're bringing in this kind of weird otherworldly energy. With Saturn, it's a little bit more straightforward and concrete. Again, that was for Monday. Tuesday, it's a little bit weirder. Trining Neptune, I really view Neptune as a neutral energy. Neptune can make us kind of delusional and crazy, but it can also be very inspiring, and it can be crucial for spiritual awareness as well. So this trine, it's really great for anything spiritual, meditation, even just like going on a walk and kind of clearing your head might be very, you'll get more bang for your buck with that kind of activity, with this type of aspect, or anything creative as well, or artistic. That's, it's very poetic. This entire chart to me looks kind of poetic, combining the moon in Cancer, trining Neptune, and then plus those Sagittarius placements, Sun and Mercury. It looks poetic to me. We're just, I don't know. I think we're very aware of some very deep truths after the kind of shit we just went through the last few weeks. But again, I think in general, this looks optimistic to me. Moving forward, really great stuff. Going to Wednesday, December 18th. Sun now aspects Neptune, which is kind of interesting. Moon is, of course, in Leo. Moon crosses over Mars early in the day. And Sun at 27 Sagittarius squares Neptune at 27 Pisces. This is particularly interesting because I don't know how many of you know this, but the galactic center is actually around 27 Sagittarius. So that's exactly where the Sun is today. And not just that, but the Sun is squaring Neptune at the same time from the galactic center, or from from that conjunction of the galactic center, I should say. So this is trippy. This is really indicating that a lot of us may have psychic experiences today. It wouldn't surprise me if there were more supernatural phenomena, clairvoyant kind of experiences, psychic experiences with like aliens, spirits, religious experiences, spiritual experiences, whatever it is. Supernatural. These are the things that tend to happen when we channel in that galactic center energy, and especially with that square to Neptune. Neptune is kind of echoing many of the same themes. It's all about kind of collective consciousness and intuition, and the non-physical realms are very active right now, and they're very the separation between the physical and the non-physical, I would expect to be much thinner today. Okay, so that could be confusing, that could be overwhelming. You might be hearing like voices in your head or something. That everything has a positive and a negative astrologically. But as long as we're open, if you're listening to this, you're probably open to these types of things, open to self-awareness, open to spirit and things like that. So yeah, I think that's what's necessary, is just being very open, because again, this is channeling in a kind of frequency that most of us aren't kind of used to operating with. It's a different kind of reality. So very exciting, but also pretty wacky. And then again, going to the moon real quick before we move on. Moon transiting through Leo. It's really highlighting that, Mars, which has recently retrograded. This is the first time since Mars went retrograde that the moon is crossing Mars. And so that's really bringing the focus there. We may be, rethinking our ambitions, rethinking, where are we putting our energy? What are we ambitious for? What do we desire? All of these things are changing at this time, okay? But again, Moon in Leo is a very confident, any Leo placement is confident, I would say, generally. But yeah, especially combining Moon and Leo with Sun and Sagittarius, they're not trining by aspect, and they won't actually, because Sun is about to enter Capricorn, but they're at least trining by sign, and Moon is also trining Mercury by aspect, by degree today as well. So lots of fire energy. I think this is really complementary, because not only do we have this weird like galactic center square from Neptune thing going on with all that like spiritual weirdness, but also we have that fire focus with Sun, Mercury, Moon, and Mars in fire signs. So it's really interesting. It's not I think typically these more spiritual things often have to do with isolation or looking within, and that could be part of it here, but I think this is much more about exploration. It's really the opposite. It is spiritual, but it may have to do with like a physical experience. So, being physically active or going somewhere new physically, like literally, and then maybe that's what's triggering that spiritual awareness or spiritual experience. Okay, so really exciting stuff. Especially if you are very spiritual, psychic, or if you have a lot of fire placements, this is going to be really exciting for you, and you're going to be in your element. Going to Thursday, December 19th, Moon continues cruising on through Leo, and if you use a wide enough orb, Moon is trining Mercury and Sun today. I know that's kind of cheating, but you could, at the very least, you could say, Mars and Mercury are still playing with that imperfect trine, that never exactly happened, but it's close enough. We can basically say it's happening in a imperfect way. Anyway, Mercury and Mars basically trining, and then Moon is gearing up for that trine with the Sun. So lots of trines, lots of fire. This is go time. This is time, we're done mulling things over. We're done looking within. It's time for action now. It's time to move forward. And I think we can have a lot of fun doing that. we do have one aspect today, and it's another trine. Part of me wishes every week was like this, but of course that's not how it works. That actually wouldn't make any sense. The whole reason why a week like this is so much fun is because of those darker weeks that we just went through. You can't have one without the other, right? If every week was a good week, it would be boring. It wouldn't be good. But anyways, yeah, so the one aspect today is another trine. So again, I just want to restate really briefly the trines between, two personal placements in Leo, trining the two personal placements in Sagittarius, plus Venus in Aquarius trining Jupiter in Gemini. This is really beautiful. I know Jupiter has been retrograde since last month. Or was it October? I don't know. You can correct me. It was October or November that Jupiter went retrograde. I don't remember exactly. But the point is, Jupiter is going to be retrograde till February. Jupiter retrograde is kind of a bummer because we don't have as much of that expansive, optimistic energy. It's more withdrawn. It's more subtle. That's a bummer. I'm not going to lie. You could definitely say that expansion is still there. It's just, again, it's more subtle. It's happening in more unexpected ways, especially with Jupiter retrograde. And it may be more subconscious or something like that. It's more behind the scenes. So, we'll take what we can get. But the beautiful part of this is that Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. They're the two, most positive planets. Sun would probably be the third most positive, if you're curious. But Venus and Jupiter, you generally can't go wrong with Venus and Jupiter. They do have their downsides, but it's kind of few and far between, and it's not even worth mentioning right now. But yeah, Venus and Jupiter, they both point to the most fun, easy parts of any chart, basically. So here they're aligning, they're trining, so they're agreeing with each other. Excuse me. Yeah, this is great because even though they are a little bit out of place, Jupiter, like I said, is retrograde and in detriment. Venus is not in detriment, but Venus in Aquarius is a little awkward. Venus has to do with pleasure and affection, and Aquarius is a very dry, kind of stoic sign. It's not the best with expressing feelings or pleasure necessarily. So it is a little bit out of place, but again, it's still beautiful because Venus trining Jupiter, it means they're agreeing. They're both showing that we are really desiring experimentation, and we're desiring social interaction, information. They're both the benefics are an air sign, so it's showing that we might be a little bored, we might be a little restless. We're open to something new, we're open to something weird. Venus in Aquarius is weird, Jupiter in Gemini is weird. These are two weird signs. So yeah, that's pretty much my take on that. But all of this pleasure, it's a little bit more accessible because of this trine. It's a little bit more straightforward. Those of you that have major air placements, you're going to soak this up the most. This is going to be the easiest for you because Venus and Jupiter, the two great benefics, are aligning with what you're about if you have those air placements, especially Gemini and Aquarius, but even Libra as well. But for the rest of us, again, we can all enjoy that. The more, even if you don't have air placements, the more you can kind of be like an air sign, the more you're going to enjoy this, if that makes sense. So the more kind of intellectually nimble and, curious, restless, intellectual, it's not just air signs that have those qualities. Some other signs do as well. But that's what's being kind of promoted with this kind of energy. That's what's being supported by these benefics. For Friday, December 20th, Moon finally leaves Leo, enters Virgo early in the day, Eastern Standard Time. And technically right before it does, when the Moon is at 29 Leo, that's where it makes that trine to the Sun that we've been gearing up for the last few days. So in other words, Moon is pretty close to trining the Sun by degree pretty much throughout the day. Honestly, for most of the day, Moon is making an out of sign trine from early Virgo to the Sun in late Sagittarius. I know it's a little bit complicated, but basically it just means this is a harmonious day. Even as the Moon enters Virgo, which is a little different from what we've seen recently, it's still harmonious because of that aspect. Okay, so yeah, Moon trining Sun tends to be a very harmonious day. Moon still has a lot of light, by the way. It's clearly not full at this point, but it's still more full than not, if that makes sense. So we still have that energy, we still have that warmth, that expression, the spontaneity. It's still generally exciting. Maybe not as much as if it was a full moon still, but we're still kind of basking in that energy to some extent. Yeah, and that's actually all I have for today. Moon trining the sun is kind of the major event of the day. For Saturday, this is actually the biggest day astrologically. It may not be, I want to be very clear, like this may not be the most dramatic day for you personally as you go through this week. If you just experienced this week without knowing anything about the astrology, it probably wouldn't be Saturday that you would say is the most important day. But because we know about astrology and cycles, we can see that Saturday is indeed a very important day, because this is the day where Sun leaves Sagittarius, enters Capricorn, and in doing so, this means that this is the winter solstice. We have finally left fall and officially began winter. So yeah, I don't think you need me to talk a lot about that. I did this video though that I keep referencing about, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and the winter solstice. I will link it here somewhere. But that's really great, I think, for kind of just understanding the difference between Sagittarius and Capricorn. Of all the two signs that are immediately next to each other, I would say Sagittarius and Capricorn are among the most different. And the reasons why I really outline in that video. The only other signs that I think would rival that difference would be Leo and Virgo is a pretty big difference, and Pisces and Aries are a pretty big difference as well. But those are the top three consecutive signs that I think are the most dramatically different. The reason why here, I'll say it very shortly just in case you don't want to watch that video. Basically, it's just because Sagittarius... it's really about the winter solstice. The winter solstice is the darkest day of the year, okay? That's why we light, candles. We put up lights for Christmas, near the winter solstice, because we're celebrating... Well, at least like my understanding of the pagan roots of the holiday is that, people were celebrating the light returning, because yes, it is the darkest time of the year, but that means that you've kind of gone over that hump, so to speak. The light is going to gradually be returning. So that explains the huge difference between Sagittarius and Capricorn. In the month before the winter solstice, it's kind of, in many ways, it's almost like the end of the entire cycle. Like I said earlier, it's just a time of eat, drink, and be merry. Nothing matters. It's a time of feasting, because traditionally, any food that you can't pickle and jar and salt and preserve in whatever way that you can, if you don't eat it, it's going to go bad. So we just feast on anything that we had left over during Sagittarius. That's why we have these holidays. Thanksgiving is in Sagittarius. Christmas is just immediately after the winter solstice, pretty much. So that's Sagittarius. It's in many ways it's the exact opposite of Capricorn. Capricorn is all about, we're in this dark time, but the light is gradually returning. Capricorn knows that spring and eventually summer will come, and that's why Capricorn has so much to do with planning, because that light is returning. The light is getting gradually, it's increasing with each day. So that's why Capricorn is obsessed with goals, planning. In some ways, it actually kind of makes sense to start our calendar year here. I know in many ways it would make more sense to start with the beginning of Aries, but the more I get into thinking about this kind of stuff, the more I don't hate having the calendar here, because it does make sense to be, thinking about the year ahead during Capricorn. So yeah, and I almost forgot, happy birthday Capricorns. This is your time to shine. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. The beginning of the week really had almost no Earth placements at all, just Uranus. But early Friday we saw Moon enter Virgo, and then by Saturday Moon is still in Virgo and Sun is now in Capricorn. So that's a huge shift. We've got some major Earth placements now. And even this, I think, is just so beautiful. You're gonna think I've lost my mind because but really, it's the astrology, honestly, that I'm excited about. I think this is so perfect because I love the lack of Earth for the beginning of the week, coming off of that full moon. Mercury gaining momentum. Mercury freshly direct. I think the lack of Earth was perfect for just starting things. Don't worry about is everything gonna work? Do we have all the details figured out? I don't think it was time to really look at everything from that heavy of a lens for most of this week. I think it was great, yeah, having that lack of that heavy energy for getting things moving. Now it actually makes sense to have more earth placements because, we've had the better part of a week with so much energy. So now it's time to like root that energy. Let's ground it. Let's make sure that we're investing in something that's actually worthwhile. And, let's like roll up our sleeves and make it happen. Whatever we were dreaming about and starting for most of this week, now it's time to actually make it happen and put in the work, So I think that's perfect. I think that's beautiful. But that's just me. Yeah. Think that's all I have to say. It's about grounding things. Sun in Capricorn, Moon in Virgo, they both have a lot in common. They both have to do with planning. They're both very industrious. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, going to Sunday, December 22nd. This, I think this would actually be the day that is the most active or volatile, and that's because there's a third quarter moon today. This technically happens late in the day, Eastern Standard Time. Excuse me, sorry, I just burped. But as soon as the moon leaves Virgo and enters Libra, once the moon reaches 1 degree Libra, it squares the sun, and in doing so, that makes a third quarter moon. Third quarter moons are a time of change and volatility, but they're more. It often is on a physical level, but it's also mental and cerebral. It's kind of 50-50. And this one is particularly strange because for this third quarter moon, the moon is conjunct the south node. So it almost feels slightly like eclipse energy. But let me be clear, this is not an eclipse. The reason why this is actually happening is because we are as far away from eclipse season as possible. The sun is actually squaring both the nodes today, which again, it just means that we're halfway between, the eclipse season of like last, what was it, like September, October, and the next one, which will happen, I believe, in like March, something like that. We're halfway between. So yeah, we are far away from that eclipse energy, but moon is conjunct the south node, which is similar. So basically what that means is we're channeling in that nodal energy, that kind of eclipse-like energy, which is, this energy is very exciting. It's the best energy for learning a great deal in a very short amount of time and developing spiritually very quickly. The downside is that this is fundamentally unstable. So yes, it's very exciting. Everything is a little bit more like a movie when you have, even like this quarter moon conjunct the south node, everything is more theatrical. There's more things lining up in ways that are life-changing, right? Like you just meet that right person that has the connection that you were looking for, or you get the job, or you decide to move, or these kind of dramatic things. That's more likely to happen with a third quarter moon like this. Again, very reminiscent of an eclipse. So yeah, very exciting, but also fundamentally unstable. Okay, but yeah, and again, taking into account this is a third quarter moon and it's in Libra, both of these kind of parts of this phenomenon suggest that this is very cerebral in nature. We're really contemplating things, and we're changing the way we think about things. We're changing our perspectives today. What else? Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned there could be some physical restlessness there as well. We may want to be physically active, but much of it is mental too. This is the time for making mental changes. Really, the third quarter moon is the last chance we have at changing things that have gone on in the past month or so. This is the last part of this lunar cycle that is conducive toward change, or fosters change, I guess. So yeah, if you need to make a change, do it today. Mercury's direct, third quarter moon conjunct the south node. Embrace that change. Resisting change today is going to make you feel restless and stressed. If you don't have any changes that you need or want to make today, go for a run, go for a walk, like do something with your body, do something with your mind even. Maybe journal or something. I don't know. I think that could help lead you to some really big realizations, whether it's that physical exercise or doing something more mental. There are a lot of new ideas and new changes that are accessible today, so definitely take advantage of that. Yeah, that's what I got. So yeah, it looks like a very exciting week. I think it looks like a very fun week, and not only is it fun and powerful, but I also think it's going to be easier than what we just dealt with. This is almost kind of like the test taking time, which I know that sounds very anxious, but if you think about it, it's actually easier. We were basically studying for the last few weeks and like putting in the work. Now it's time to just show up and just, kind of give it what we've got. So it is more intense, but it's also, I think, easier. So very excited for that. Next week, we've got 2 outer planets squaring, which is a pretty big deal. We have one kind of planetoid stationing direct, and we also have a new moon. So lots more exciting developments to talk about. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you are interested in getting a reading, there will be a link on your screen that you can get more information on those. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week.